Good morning, good morning. Now this morning, last week if you were here, I talked from Joshua and I talked about what was happening for the Israelites. And this morning some of the worship songs have been talking a little bit about crossing the sea and what the Israelites were doing, where they were leaving, they'd left Egypt, they'd gone across on dry land through the sea, and then all of the soldiers, the Egyptian soldiers, been swallowed up. They carried on. They're in the promised land. They were in there a while. They're in there 40 years. And then they stepped into the next part, a new season. So last week, if you were here, you will know, and maybe you've even looked at it yourself, that we looked at Joshua 6. And the focus was on Achan, and the focus was on looking at the temptation that he faced. The Israelites had stepped in to take down the walls of Jericho. They'd obeyed what God had said, and the walls had collapsed, and they stepped in, but then there was a bit of a problem. Achan had sinned, and that had meant that where the Israelites should have continued to have victory, they didn't. And it didn't end very well for Achan. Actually, more than 40 people died because of him. 36 of them were from the Israelite army, and then the rest of them were him and his family. So, not a good result. But today, I wanted to talk. I think often when you hear speakers or preachers, we focus on the men in the Bible, but I've often thought about some of the amazing women that seem kind of a little bit hidden away, but these absolute gems. And thinking about that, I started to think about the woman in my life and the way that they've impacted my life. I've only got one wife. It's not a woman like that, but in case you were concerned. But three women, there's many, but three women who are really significant in my life were my grandmother, my Nana, who prayed for me every day. She was a faithful woman of God. She prayed for me. She was every day, her and Granddad would get up and they would pray for I don't know how many people. You would stay with them, and I know I've said this before, and it was a wee bit annoying because you would hope that, we're ready to go. Well, you'd hear through the wall, you could hear them praying and praying for about 2 hours, and then at 10 o'clock they got up. But if you were a missionary, you were getting prayed for. If you were a family, you were getting prayed for twice a day. Absolutely amazing. And my mother, a real faithful woman of God, and she's been so strong and committed in her walk with Christ, even when others around her haven't been. When my mother was in her 20s, she'd had my brother, and she was pregnant with a little girl, and she had the little girl, but 3 months later, the baby died of cot death. And for Mum and Dad, that was a pretty horrible time. In her pain, Mum prayed, Father, give me another child. Like Hannah, Lord, give me another child and I'll give him back to you, or I'll give them back to you. And this is me. But amazing, an amazing mum, an amazing woman. And I rang her before because I just wanted to check. I said, are you all right if I talk about this? And I can't really understand the pain that would have been present at that time. But to cry out to God in that, amazing, faithful woman of God. And then, of course, my beautiful wife, it's over the page. A woman who has held on to God when life has been really painful and really unfair, where she faithfully walks with God, living in obedience to Him, and a real blessing to me. And as a side note, I get her to have a look at this stuff as well, to critique it, run her eyes over it to see if it's any good. I tell you this because women in the Bible have an amazing impact. And sometimes it's, like I said, it's a little bit hidden away and it's a wee bit quieter. And Rahab is a story of this as well. In the book of Joshua, we're going to skip back. So if you've got your Bibles, we've been hanging around last week in in chapter 6. If you skip back to chapter 2 of Joshua, we're going to hear a little bit about Rahab. So reading from verse 1, then Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp at Acacia Grove. He instructed them, scout out the land on the other side of the Jordan River. This was before they crossed the river, especially around Jericho. So the 2 men set out and came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab, and they stayed the night there. But someone told the king of Jericho. These guys were spotted. So they were spies, but they'd been seen. So that wasn't ideal, and now they're in a bit of a predicament because they're at this lady's house, prostitute, and don't really know what's going to happen next. I thought it would make an amazing movie, all of the stuff happening within this time frame of them crossing across the Jordan River, they're going in here, the spies are freaking out, what's going to happen? So the 2 men set out and came to the house of the prostitute named Rahab and stayed there the night. But someone had told the king of Jericho, some Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, bring out the men who have come into your house, for they have come to spy out the whole land. Rahab had hidden the two men, but she replied, yes, the men were here earlier, but I didn't know where they were from. They left town at dusk, just before the gates were closed, or about to close. I don't know where they went. If you hurry, you could probably catch up with them. Actually, verse 6, she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them beneath a bundle of flax that she had laid out. So the king's men went looking for spies along the road leading to the shallow crossing of the Jordan River. And as soon as the king's men had left, the gate of Jericho was shut. Before the spies went to sleep that night, so Rahab's not silly, so she's gone, right, I'll look after you. She's hidden them up the top, and then she's like, right. And she goes and meets with these guys, just about to go to sleep. And she said to them, I know the Lord has given you this land. I was quite fascinated by that because I thought, how does she know? Obviously, they were all terrified, and they'd actually heard a bit of what was going on. And you'll hear soon that she says, well, I know about the Red Sea. Well, that was 40 years ago. That was a long time ago. And she goes, I know you've had these victories. I know the Lord has given you this land, she told them. We're all afraid of you. Everyone living in this land is in terror. For we have heard how the Lord has made a dry path through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. We know what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, whose people you completely destroyed. No wonder our hearts have melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things. For the Lord your God is the supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below. Pretty amazing. Now she said, now swear to me by the Lord that you'll be kind to me and my family since I've helped you. Give me some guarantee when Jericho is conquered that you will let me live, along with my father, my mother, my brother, my sisters, and all of my family. So 3 things I'd like to point out. I know the Lord has given you this land. No wonder our hearts are melted in fear, for the Lord is supreme, and He's high above all else. An amazing insight for a woman living in with the Canaanites. She was quite aware of who God was and how powerful He was. Now swear to me that Lord will be kind to me since my family's helped you. Give me some guarantee when Jericho's conquered. So she knew it was like the place where I'm standing is going to be the Lord's. It's going to be conquered. So I'm kind of snookered here. I've helped you though. And then they responded by saying, we offer our lives as a guarantee for your safety. If you don't betray us, we'll keep our promise and be kind to you when the Lord gives us the land. Then since Rahab was built on the town wall, she let them down the rope so they could escape into the hill country. And she gave them pretty specific instructions. Verse 16, hide there for 3 days from the men searching for you. Then when they've returned, you can go on your way. Before they left, the men told her, we will be bound by the oath. When we come into the land, you must leave the scarlet rope from the window through which you let us down. And all of your family members, your father, your mother, your brothers, sisters, all of your relatives must be inside the house. If they go out of the house onto the street, they'll be killed, and it's not our fault. But if anyone lays a hand on the people inside the house, we'll accept responsibility. And she was like, yeah, okay, I accept your terms. I quite like that. She's given them a bit of a, hey, I'm going to look after you. She did tell a few lies. She's protected them, and then she's gone, okay, can we come up with some sort of deal here? And they give her a bit of a suggestion, and she was like, yeah, okay, that's all right, I'll take that. Rahab was so we know now Rahab's a Canaanite woman. She lived in Jericho, and she was a prostitute. And I kind of thought on this a little bit. Often we have different ideas or thoughts around what a prostitute is, or it's kind of mentioned, and then I'm not sure. What do you do with that information? And I'd like to suggest maybe that most people who go into prostitution aren't choosing it as a career path. I often ask students at school, hey, what do you think? What do you want to do when you leave school? I've never ever had one of them say, I want to be a prostitute. Most of them I don't actually know, but I wonder if some things that happen, and some things that mar, and some things that scar, and some things that take and destroy, cause people to maybe step into that. And maybe that's the position where Rahab is. She was in this land, and she was the prostitute. She was known as the prostitute. And that's not a really highly respected role. And maybe, I don't know what her situation was exactly, but maybe she was just absolutely sick of it. Maybe she was so pulled down by all of that which she had had to battle. Maybe she'd had a whole world of pain that we don't really know about. But one thing she did know about was God. And she believed in God. She says, I know the Lord has given you this land, the place where I'm standing. We've heard how the Lord dried up the water on the Red Sea. And then she says, for the Lord your God is in heaven above and on earth below. So at that point, Rahab's made a decision, I'm leaving that and I'm going here. And like's come up a couple of times this morning, it's leaving the old stuff and stepping into the new. It's choosing to do that to live a new life. And for Rahab, it was quite risky because I thought about that rope hanging down and I thought, it's a bit risky because those guys are coming back. Yes, everyone's locked in there and they're freaking out, but what if they see the rope? What if they go, hey, you didn't get them out the city gates just before dawn, you dropped them down the rope and you lied to us, and then... So she risked it. She risked her life in the hope of something else. She decided to put her trust in God at this point. And I also thought, I'm not actually sure, how did it come about that she got all of her family into her house? Because she somehow convinced them, but then did she convince them and say, hey guys, come over and we're going to have a party for, I don't know, a week, 10 days, just hang about anyway, don't go out there. And I thought, well, why are we staying here? Well, okay, I'll tell you. At the risk that maybe someone leaks a bit and then it all goes to custard. But the Israelites said that they were going to save her. Rahab and her parents, her brothers and sisters, was all waiting and trusting the men of God and their word. Her hope was in something far greater than what she was living in and experiencing. You know, some people, I think, just accept their situation. It's like, oh, what will be, will be. Can't really do much about it. Can't change anything. But she was different. She decided that she was going to side with God, and it was a massive risk. She had to decide how she was going to respond to God. And I heard something really cool from John Wooden. He was a UCLA basketball coach. And there's a quote that he says, when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. Quite interesting, eh? Rahab had this opportunity. She'd already prepared in her heart what she was going to say because it was already within her. When opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. So as Christians, we're preparing for the coming of Christ. As the virgins, we're constantly ready. We're constantly drawing near to Him. Feels like I've got a lot of pages here. I actually have a lot. I won't tell you how many because you'll get scared. But we know that in Romans 11:22, there's a verse that says, "Now notice how God is notice how God is both kind and severe. He is severe towards those who disobeyed, but kind to you if you continue to trust in his kindness." God was absolutely severe with Achan. If you remember Achan, he had seen these really nice bits of gold and silver, and he was like, "Oh, flip, I just can't help myself. I've got to have it." But absolutely disobedient to what God had said, not very long before. But Rahab, even though a sinner, her heart was towards God, and her heart was toward the things of God and the people of God. And as we'll find out, well, maybe, is God kind to Rahab? He was severe to Achan. Was he going to be kind to Rahab? Now, we can easily skip forward, and I think I shared last week, when you read the story of Joseph, he couldn't skip forward a couple of chapters and read what was going to happen next. That would be amazing. And similar for us, we can't skip forward to see what's going to happen next. We're in this process of trusting. So Rahab is in this position now where she has to wait. This is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is the deal. She was like, right, don't know if there was a handshake, high five, a little pop or a fist pump, but she was waiting. And it's in those moments of waiting, hoping, and trusting, not knowing how things are going to play out. And that's kind of where things become a bit stressful. And I've written down flavored with great hope. I thought that was quite good, so I knew I didn't come up with it. So just kind of popped into my mind. So stressful times flavored with great hope. The instructions from the spies to Rahab, Joshua 2:18, were that she would leave the scarlet rope hanging from the window. And I thought about that, and then I thought about, I wonder if they would see it, because they're going to come in. But if you know the story well, they marched around the wall. So actually, they saw that rope 13 times. Once every day for 6 days, and then 7 times, they thought, oh, there it is, there it is, there it is, as they went round. So they knew, in fact, where she lived, where she stayed, and where the rope was. Joshua, the fighting men, and the priests were doing the loops around the wall. Now Rahab's inside, and again it's this waiting time, and she hears, boop, boop, boop. Oh, okay, well maybe something's happening. And then nothing. And then the next day, I won't do it again, but you get the idea. Trumpet. Maybe today. And then, and on it goes. It's like, oh, come on. And I think sometimes, how do we relate that to us? It's in that waiting, in that time where it feels like, oh, come on. It just seems like things are taking so long. Like Joseph, when he was in there waiting, he'd had some level of success, then he's thrown into prison. And then it's like, oh, God gives him this dream and there's hope to get out of this place. And he's like, yes. No, wait another year or so. And it's like that for Rahab. In this waiting, she didn't know what it looked like. She didn't know what God had said to the Israelites, I don't think. The Israelites knew what was happening. They were going to march around. She didn't know what was happening. She just heard these trumpets playing. And everyone else in Jericho would have been freaking out. But in these times for us is when it makes us stronger. It's in those times of hope for something, but maybe it's not coming to plan when we hoped it would. I remember, and some of you heard the story, we had this prophetic word years ago. Ange and I looked at this house, and as you do, we did quite a bit of this. We're hunting for houses, and we looked at this house, and we're like, oh, we love it. It's brilliant. It's just out of Cambridge. Amazing. And then the guy who owned it said, I'm sorry, I can't sell it to you. This guy I know, so I'm going to sell it to him. And we're like, oh, bummer. We really like that place. Oh, well, never mind. Like something else will come up. But we both keep thinking about it. And then we felt a little bit naughty, like it was bit obsessive, kind of, but weird. So we were like, no, we need to lay it down. Sorry, God, that we're kind of obsessing over this house. And then we went to church, and we got a prophetic word to say, God will give you the house in your hearts. Make sure your lounge is big enough. I'm like, yes. So at that time, Jack was a baby, and there was a few little events in there that made things a little bit more challenging, possibly than it needed to be. But it was 6 years, 2017. So that was 7 years after that word was given. It was 2017 that we bought that house. I got in touch with the guy and I said, hey, you keen to sell that house? And he was like, yeah, maybe in 20 years. And then asked him again. And he said, oh, yep, end of the year, get back in touch. So years of waiting, years of hoping, years of, oh, come on. And you went, oh, yeah, it's just around the corner. It's just around the corner. And in 2017, we moved in, and we've just, with the help of Aaron and many, many other people, we've just made the lounge big enough. This is like, we've lived there for 7 years. So it's a bit of a process. And I think sometimes when we have our thinking around the timing of things, that's when we're in danger of getting discouraged. So this morning, if that's you, if God's spoken to you, or if you've got the hope of something, or maybe you feel like, oh, maybe there's nothing else for me, then I'd encourage you in these times, in this time, this is when we need to trust in God. Just as Rahab trusted in God, and her situation was pretty hopeless. She's a prostitute trapped away in this horrible situation, living with these guys that were, or this group of people that were about to be completely destroyed. But God saw her, and God heard her, and God listened to her. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Proverbs 3:5. In times of waiting when life is hard, we face challenges. But how do we respond? I love this story from Admiral James Stockdale. You may have heard it. Now, Stockdale was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for 7.5 years. Before meeting with the legendary soldier and statesman Jim Collins, who's the author of a book called Good to Great, read Stockdale's memoir and found its grim details hard to bear. Despite his knowledge that Stockdale's life later was happy, Collins wondered, if it feels depressing for me, how on earth did you survive how on earth did he survive when he was actually there and he didn't know the end of the story? When he posed this question to the admiral, Stockdale answered, I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted not only that I would get out, but also that I would prevail in the end and turn the experience into a defining event in my life, which in retrospect I would not trade. Collins asked him about the personal characteristics of prisoners who did not make it out of the camps. The optimists, he replied. Oh, they were the ones who said, we're going to be out by Christmas, and Christmas would come, and Christmas would go. Then they would say, we're going to be out by Easter, and Easter would come, and Easter would go. And then Thanksgiving, and then Christmas again. And they died of a broken heart. This is a very important lesson. You must never confuse faith that you'll prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever that might be. The formulation became known as the Stockdale paradox. The Admiral elaborated further on the concept when at West Point graduation he was asked if he dwelt on the end of his imprisonment to sustain him or if he lived day by day. I lived day to day, on a day-to-day basis. Most guys thought it was really better for everyone to be an optimist. I wasn't naturally that way. I knew too much about politics of Asia when I got shot down. I think there was a lot of damage done by optimists. Other writers from other wars shared that same opinion. The problem is, some people Some people believe what professional optimists are passing out and come unglued when their predictions don't work out. I suggest that Rahab had this approach in her situation. She was faced with the most brutal facts of her life. She was a prostitute. She was stuck with a bunch of disobedient and worldly people that didn't know or want to know God. She knew her reality, but she heard of God and she chose to trust Him. Skipping forward to Joshua 6:20, when the sound of the... So I'm thinking, verse 6, the Israelites, they're all ready to go. They've been around 6 times. It's the Sunday, it's the 7th day, they go around 7 times. And then, boomfa, the walls collapse. They completely destroyed everything. Well, almost everything. I love this next bit. So, sometimes in life, it's like all of this craziness going on. You're busy with work, your wife's asking for date night, you've got lots of stuff to organise, you've got stuff to do with church, you've got all of these things happening. And amongst the craziness, you've got to try and make good decisions. So all of this is going on, the walls collapse, everything's a bit crazy and chaotic, and Joshua goes, oh yeah, hey, spies, spy 1, spy 2, remember what you said. So in amongst all of this, Joshua's acted with integrity, and he's asked his 2 spies to do the same thing. Honor what you said. Go and get that woman and bring her out and her family. And it says, I love it. They bring her out and said, we're going to put her in a safe space just outside of the camp of Israel. And I thought, oh, that's a bit stink. I thought she'd be in amongst it, but I'll just put her just outside of the camp. But the men who had been spies went and brought out Rahab, her mother, father, and her brothers, and all of the other relatives that were with her. They moved her whole family to a safe place near the camp of Israel. Then the Israelites completely destroyed and burned everything, except for Achan's sneaky bits and pieces. So Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute and her relatives who were in the house because she had hidden the spies Joshua sent to Jericho. And she lives among the Israelites to this day. Not today, but it was a while ago. This was quite interesting as well. I did a little bit of research. And it says, before the battle of Jericho, the Israelites sent 2 spies to check out the city. When they discovered they hid in the house of Rahab the prostitute, the Bible describes her house as being located in part of the city wall with the window looking out of the city, through which she let down the spies so they could escape. Joshua says, the men who spied on Jericho, go into the prostitute's house and bring her out, in accordance with your oath. When the Germans, I'm not sure what Germans, but the Germans, or some Germans, excavated Jericho in 1907 to 1909, they discovered a portion of the wall on the north side of the city that had not fallen. Moreover, there were houses built on the rampart against the outer city wall. The walls of these dwellings were really thin, only 1 brick width. That's not very good for insulation, indicating that this was likely a poor part of the city. It is plausible that this is the area where Rahab's house was located. So boom, it's all being destroyed. God is clearing it all, except we're going to look after this family. I think that's quite amazing. If you feel like God doesn't see you, remember this story, because here's this woman, a prostitute, with her family, in this, not the Israelites, not God's chosen people, and it's a wee bit like the Israelites, God's chosen people, kind of grafted out, if you like. Achan's grafted out, and Rahab's grafted in. In Romans 11, it talks about grafted out, grafted in. Like us being like wild olives and we get grafted in. I don't know much about planting, but being grafted in is a good thing because it means that you can grow. And God rescued Rahab and her family. They moved the whole family to a safe place, and then she lives among the Israelites. And Rahab was considered righteous. Righteous just means right standing with God. It means that she could stand made right by God because of what she did. He removed her from a situation and he blessed her. He actually said, I think, you're mine. You're now part of our family. Come over here. So what do we know about Rahab? That's a nice story, but it actually doesn't stop there. She's mentioned in the New Testament. She's mentioned in the Old Testament. And I've made it a bit of an assumption here, and you can tell me off if you want, but she was the wife of, I'm going to say Salmon. It looks like salmon, but I don't think people would have called him salmon. I'm thinking, this is my assumption, that she's married to Salmon or Salmon, since the fact that he was the father of a child and she was the mother of a child. So I'm kind of just making that assumption. If you're okay with that, I'll carry on. So there's no mention of her having children when she's taken out. And now there's mention of her being with a guy and they have a child. And this is mentioned in Matthew, and it's actually mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus. So Salmon was the father of Boaz, and Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Amazing. And we know a little bit about Boaz being a kind, compassionate man of God, brought up by an amazing woman. Pretty cool. Rahab was not only brought into the family of God, she was part of, they didn't say this in the Bible, but I've added it, the whakapapa of Jesus. If you've ever thought of the situation was tough, if you've ever thought your situation was tough, and maybe you've been forgotten, I suggest that it would be a really good idea to take a lesson from this woman. See, Jesus loves the one that seems like they're absolutely down and out and nothing's happening. The two dudes next to Jesus, I was thinking about this as well. Jesus is in the middle, and you've got these two guys kind of having this conversation going on. And I don't know how you'd be feeling when you're hanging on a cross, and one of the guys starts up this conversation. Hey, if you're I thought you're the Son of God. Do something. Save yourself. Save us as well. Aren't you the Messiah? And this arrogant response of, I don't really believe in you. Whereas this, I don't know what side he was on, but the other guy's going, hey, this guy is the Son of God, don't you know? He's done nothing wrong. We are the turkeys that got ourselves here because of whatever they've done. And he's responding kind of like Rahab, like this little voice, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And I think it's easy to think, two guys are both about to die. The whole of Jericho is going to be destroyed. They're all going to die. But only that criminal and only Rahab are the ones that actually humbled themselves. Interesting, eh? And where he says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Well, I think for a starter, how did he know about that? Your kingdom's not on this earth. It's like Jesus talked about that. So this guy had some level of understanding. But I heard a saying, I don't know if you'll like it or not, as a tree leans, so it falls. When you get close to death, or I've heard people say, oh, I'm going to become a Christian when I'm 70. Oh, I'm going to follow Jesus when I'm whatever. Oh, I'm going to do this when I've... But often, it says the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Or there's so many opportunities that may be missed because, like this morning we've sung, Lord, I give you my heart. Will you surrender absolutely everything to him today? There's a song called Graves to Gardens. The worship team's going to come up now, and we're going to sing soon. But there's a song, not the song coming up, called Graves to Gardens, and it says, you turn mourning into dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You are the only one who can. And I think often we can be guilty of trying to take control of things by ourselves. Rahab was maybe tempted to take things into her own hands, but really she didn't. She trusted everything to God. She put all of her hope into all of her eggs into one basket, so to speak. All of her trust in him. So this morning, we're going to finish. I don't know your situation. I don't know if you feel some of what Rahab was feeling. I don't know if there's been the hope of something, there's been the encouragement of something, or maybe there's even a prophetic word, or maybe there's a desire in your heart, but it seems like it's so far away and almost impossible. But we serve a God who loves that stuff. He loves the impossible. Because the Bible says nothing is impossible with God. So can we stand? I'm going to pray. And then I really invite you this morning to not to trust in your own abilities, not to lean on your own understanding, not to do things in your timing, but to completely, absolutely surrender and put all of your trust in him, in Jesus. In Psalms it says, the Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and rich in love. Holy God, we come to you this morning. Lord, we all have challenges. We all have things that are difficult in our lives, where there's heartbreak, where there's being trampled or being rejected or being put down or made to feel less than. And whether it's your decision or not to get you in that situation, Jesus is looking at you with open arms, full of compassion, full of love, full of mercy for you. All you have to do is respond. As Rahab responded, as the man on the cross next to Jesus acknowledged him and said, Jesus, remember me. So this morning, let it be different. Choose to walk in the truth. Choose to trust in Jesus this morning, because he has more for you than you would know. If you've still got breath, there's still hope. So if you want prayer this morning, if you want to come forward, we'd love to pray with you. We'd love to stand with you. But I encourage you this morning, listen to the words of this song. And don't just sing them from your head. Let it be something that goes deeper in your heart.
Unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God.